Good afternoon. I am Robert Surgeson, Chairperson of the Cape Medical Plan Board of Trustees. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all those attending Cape Medical Plan's 62nd Annual General Meeting. I'll start by just reading the notice of convenience meeting. Notice is formally hereby given that the 62nd Annual General Meeting of the members of Cape Medical Plan will be a virtual meeting held today, the 27th of August 2024 at 12 o'clock. Just moving on to the formal agenda items, I'd just like to welcome all the members. We have achieved quorum, and I'm sure many members will continue to join as we progress through the meeting. We do have 36 members represented by proxy, and we've received 2 apologies. I would also like to welcome Ms. Shaniel Sickle, the chairperson of the Cape Medical Plan's Audit and Risk Committee. So welcome there. I know you can't respond, but glad you're joining us. Just before we continue with some of the agenda items, I just want to give some housekeeping rules. First of all, when it comes to asking questions, all members will be muted during the meeting. Members are able to submit questions verbally. I will not be able to, so members are able to submit questions verbally by typing in the Q&A facility. We have set aside time for the to answer members' questions later in the meeting. So just please be patient once you've posted your questions. You can post a text question by typing the Q&A facility, and your question will be answered verbally. Members are requested from asking questions of a personal nature pertaining to their membership and benefits, but to focus on questions that are pertinent to the business of the annual general meeting. When it comes to voting, the voting platform is currently open and will remain open for a short time after the final item of the agenda has been covered. Please remember to vote on each item. You're either for, against, or that you are withholding your vote. So please actually make sure you do submit your vote. If members submitted a valid proxy before the meeting, they will not be able to vote again today, as they have passed this right on to their respective proxy. Please remember that voting is reserved for principal members who are in good standing with the scheme. We encourage everyone to ensure they have voted before leaving the site. The voting results will be sent out as a separate communication within the next few days. Moving on to some of the agenda items. The confirmation with no objections and corrections received from the members, we take the minutes as approved. So confirmation signing of minutes from the previous annual general meeting. There were no matters arising, nothing was received. So item 3 is dealt with. The chairman's report, I will take the report as read. The report highlights, together with a scheme update, will form part of the principal office feedback that you'll receive shortly. Just to continue, keep the flow of the meeting going, I'm going to jump to point 7. So there were no motions received. So that item is dealt with. So I'm going to hand over to the principal officer, Charlene, for her scheme update. Over to you, Charlene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, I'd say to everybody. Yes, and thank you for joining us. Those of you in Cape Town on a very blustery day, at least you didn't have to drive to the AGM. A lot has been happening in the industry, and I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of external pressures, if we can put it that way, and then focusing on internally what is going on in your scheme. Always remembering that this scheme allows full participation of membership in changing rules, in doing product pricing, which is very different to any other scheme out there. If we could just start and have a look at the macro environment, if I could have, yes, thank you, slide. Looking at national health insurance, I don't want to go into it in detail, but there are a few pertinent points I need to cover because I think they can be very, very confusing. We all know that the NHI Act was signed into law in May 2024, and nothing has happened since then in terms of the NHI Act itself. There have been other acts that have been challenged. we all know the current proposals are financially and institutionally impractical. This scheme has never ever questioned the principle of access to health in the Constitution. We recognize it. I think the problem is how it is to be implemented, and the current form of the NHI Act is certainly not going to achieve that. What is important, what are schemes doing? BHF, which is the Board of Healthcare Funders, has been working on legal documents way before the Act was signed into law, and they have already put forward their legal case. It's one of the first institutions that have done it. There are many out there that are putting forward cases. BHF is trying to have the whole NHI Act set aside. So we support that, we provide information for that, and that is where we are going. Just a few things that have come out recently that I'd like to point out so it doesn't confuse people. You've got the National Health Act, which is not the same as NHI, and there was a High Court ruling a month or so ago to say that healthcare professionals do not need a certificate of need, and it's unconstitutional. Now, the certificate of need is embedded in the NHI Act, so it's quite important to note that, because healthcare professionals are saying they don't want to have to apply to practice in a certain area and get a certificate. The other thing that has happened recently is that there's something called a Presidential Health Compact. Now, that was first signed in 2018, and it's suppliers who get together and everybody involved in the healthcare industry agreeing to work together towards universal healthcare. Now, it was signed in 2018. The second Presidential Health Compact was signed the other day on the 22nd of the 8th. And what is very important is that it's been boycotted generally by business and doctors, because what they are saying is it is trying, they've put something in there to say that everybody who signs this health compact actually supports NHI. So it takes away the ability to challenge the NHI Act. So just so you understand that these things are different pressures that are going on, we definitely see a lot of legal action is going to happen, and obviously cost a lot of money to business and to all the other institutions involved in this. We do not see NHI coming into effect for many, many years. And what is important for members is retain your private cover. Very important. Don't think NHI is around the corner. And the important thing as far as the Act is concerned is where will schemes fit in? Because the most important section is where the NHI Act states that schemes can only offer services that the state cannot provide. Now, there's no list of that. We have no idea what the state is going to be able to provide or not. So at the moment, that is the thing that we watch very, very carefully. So please watch the space. Be careful what you read, because there's a lot of nonsense out there. And we do know that our newly appointed Minister of Health has been going around doing a roadshow, pushing NHI to the point where he said here they will push NHI even if it threatens the government of national unity. So some quite scary conversations that are happening out there in terms of NHI. Next slide, please. Looking at external threats that are actually affecting the industry, and it's way more than NHI. What we are experiencing at the moment is the insurance companies that are selling health products and people think it is a medical scheme. Huge threat. There's no control over it. There's no protection for the consumer. The consumer does not know what they are buying. I've tried to engage with some of these people selling, and they don't give you the final details until you've signed up. So you never know what is excluded. From a scheme's point of view, what it is doing, however, is attracting young and healthy members. So schemes in general are losing their cross-subsidy. The other issue that is problematic at the moment is the Health Market Inquiry's recommendations that schemes get together and negotiate with suppliers has been ignored. So you do have smaller schemes like ours at a bit of a disadvantage in being able to negotiate with the large suppliers. And we saw last year what that led to is that we did not come to any contract with the NHN group. And you as members are experiencing that, where we're saying to you, don't use that facility. It's not part of the NHN. However, the hospital groupings that we have signed with have got a huge footprint throughout the country. and there are always facilities available for members, and we always put that as top priority. Next slide, please. Looking at general industry issues, and these are issues that actually came out from the Council of Medical Schemes that all schemes are experiencing. So Cape Medical Plan is not any different to all the others out there. And it's quite honestly a worldwide problem in a lot of cases. You do have an aging population. Your member and beneficiary risk profile is deteriorating. There is a higher burden of disease. People are getting a lot more sick, and they're getting sick a lot younger. There's a huge demand for health services, which is pushing up claims ratios. We are seeing it particularly in the area of medicine, where in terms of oncology, we are being requested to pay for biologicals and increasingly expensive medicines. So we watch that very, very carefully. Schemes reserves are diminishing, and we do see there are some schemes out there who are doing this on purpose. They're just diminishing their reserves. One of the big schemes has gone out there and told their members that they will be decreasing reserves for the year ahead. All this, what it means from your point of view, is you've got an upward pull on your contributions, and scheme membership is becoming unaffordable for quite a number of families who are part of the industry at the moment. Very important to note is that your industry is actually controlled by the insurance industry. If you look at all the big schemes, they're administered by one of the big three insurers. And the danger with that is those insurers are not really worried on the health of the scheme, because if the scheme's not healthy, they just sell members an insurance product. So a very difficult industry to work in, a lot of pressures, but that doesn't mean it's all doom and gloom. Next slide, please. What are we doing at Cape Medical Plan? Well, first of all, you've seen we have a new logo. We decided on putting CMP Medical Aid because we also realized that we didn't want to just be associated with the Cape. So we do business, a lot of it online. People want to know that we do actually have a footprint throughout the country. So we've kept the CMP and medical aid. So that's our new logo. New product names also, so people, if you notice with the names, we're actually incorporating into the name what the product covers. For example, the 100, 200, so people see the difference between the percentage we cover on specialists and whether there's savings or not. So it's just a little bit more meaningful for people out there. We have been in a process of updating the website. And a lot of the reason behind that is we're doing a lot of work in the social media space to attract younger members using Google Ads, etc., because that is where young people are going to look for information. Now, if you're asking what would the profile be of the person you want at Cape Medical Plan, we have a profile of membership. We want to bring in people who will cross-subsidize, and we are looking for families because we are, if you look at the market, our rates are very attractive to people with families because of the child rate. So we're looking at younger people, generally mothers with children, because mothers are generally looking for what scheme they will go on to, because more and more people are buying medical aid outside of the companies that they work for, or they're working for their own, for themselves rather. The other thing we're doing is setting up specific broker networks, working with that very carefully, because we have realized that with the complexity of the industry we're working in, that people don't understand what's going on. So they are using brokers more and more to assist them with their decisions. Next slide. Other things we have looked at in terms of changes here at Cape Medical Plan. There was a question that came out of last year's AGM, and we've been very aware of it this year with changes with international accounting standards, looking at auditors, and also from a governance point of view, it's very important to go out there and have a look at what's available and what the costing is. And we've done it in a time where there's been massive change in terms of the accounting standards. For those of you who are financially orientated, you've got IFRS 17, which has come in, which has changed the face of our financials. It's also cost us a lot of money. Our current auditors are PwC, Pricewaterhouse. And we had a very rigorous process, which was guided from the audit committee. And we looked at various people. We went out to tender, and on the table we had 2, PwC and BDO. Looking at it, the suggestion from the audit committee, which was confirmed by the board, and this is an issue that you need to vote on, is that we go ahead for the 2024 audit with BDO. Our audit fee is a significant part of our admin costs. We did have a massive increase. Most of that was attributable to IFRS 17. The reason behind a lot of that expense is that the auditors now bring in their own actuaries to do actuarial work, and that is a very costly fee there. So that is one of the items that we're asking you to vote on, putting forward BDO as the auditors for 2024. And we looked at many, many factors in terms of making that decision. Next slide, please. Going now into the IFRS 17, it's been some very difficult concepts, and those of you who've downloaded the full set of financial statements or even looked at the summaries that we presented might ask, what on earth is going on? So I just wanted to show a few different terms so that you could understand exactly what is going on. Schemes have been classed as a mutual entity. We always were a mutual entity. So what it now means is that the accumulated fund figure that sits on the balance sheet now becomes what is known as liability for future members, which in itself is confusing. And that liability for future members is actually divided into a current portion and a long-term portion. So if you're looking for the accumulated reserves or funds on the balance sheet, you won't see it. You'll see it under liability for future members. Your provision for claims, known as your IBNR, is now referred to as liability for incurred claims. And this is where a lot of changes come, where actuarial input is used, and we have a risk adjustment for what is known as non-financial risk. And what is that? What that is saying is, if you have claims that have been incurred and those claims have not yet been paid, you also have to do an adjustment for the fact that you might not have enough money in the bank to actually pay those claims together with the current claims. So quite complex. We've had a lot of debate between our actuaries and the auditors' actuaries to get to figures there, and it has changed the way we look at that liability for incurred claims, and it does mean it's added extra into that cost, which affects the bottom line. Those of you who have savings balances, those have not disappeared. They've just been added in now on the balance sheet into what is known as an insurance contract liability. Insurance receivables, so that part that was sitting on the asset part of the balance sheet is now part of the net insurance contract liability. Also sounds very complex. If we remember, those of you who are accountants in the old days, you couldn't net things off. Now we're being forced to net something off. Risk contribution income is now called insurance revenue. And then also a huge difference here, your relevant healthcare expenditure, in other words, your admin costs, the old-fashioned admin costs, they are divided into what is known as attributable and non-attributable. So attributable meaning it can be directly related to the insurance contract, and that is all added into the insurance service result. So you don't see the old claims or subscriptions minus claims, get a figure, then minus your admin costs. If you are looking at the detailed financials, I suggest you look at note 20 and note 12. Those are quite relevant in terms of the changes there. Next slide, please. So this is, I'm not going to go into detail here. This is what the statement of profit and loss and comprehensive income now looks like. It looks very confusing. So that insurance revenue would basically be your, in the old days, your subscriptions. That insurance service expense, which involves a whole lot of figures that are pushed into there now. And you don't see a profit or loss for the year, because basically what happens is whatever the difference is moved into the liability for future members. In other words, it's gone to accumulated funds. The non-attributable operating expenses, that figure there, that's only part of the admin costs, because the rest of it is actually included in that insurance service expense. Next slide. So your statement of financial position, or what we call the balance sheet, we look at the asset side, and that hasn't changed that much. The only difference is your insurance receivables are no longer reflected there. They are included in the insurance contract liability under liabilities. And if you look at the liabilities part, there's no accumulated reserve. You now have insurance contract liabilities to future members, and there's a non-current part and a current part. And if you add those two figures up, that gives you your old accumulated fund. And then your contributions and trade and other payables. To make it simple, I've tried to convert figures to graphs so you can see what's going on. If you are looking at the detailed financials, the 2022 figures are restated to tie up to the IFRS 17 compliance. And we also have an opening balance sheet change for 2021. So you will see 3 balance sheets there. The IFRS 17 project itself has cost this scheme and other schemes a great deal of money, because we've had to get experts in to assist us through the process. So not only has it increased the audit costs, but you will see there that we have a consulting fee, which was over R1 million. And that's a huge amount of money. I've said to the accountants as well, you kind of need to explain to members what has cost us so much money. So it's a one-off fee, but it has meant that the general audit fee has increased because that ongoing input from schemes actuaries and the actuaries of the accountants or auditors as such will be there permanently, and that has increased costs. Next slide. Looking at where we are and trying to make sense of it all, looking at our underwriting, 2023, we had an 11.7 million underwriting loss, as opposed to the 11 million the year before. We did mention at the AGM the last year that our pricing for 2023 was probably not quite as high as it should have been, because the claims came in at the end of 2022, which is when the pricing started. So we had a fairly high increase last year, and we have seen in the 2024 figures that we are looking at now that this has been a benefit, and our underwriting figures are looking better. Next slide. Looking at where a lot of the money went, and we've got that top claiming bubble that sits there. It was there in 2023. We had 19 cases over $1 million, cost us 29 million. So you can see where a lot of the money went. And that's 15% of the claims. Not much of a change from 2022, where 14.59% of the net claims went to the top claimers. Our top claim for 2023 was 3.2 million. And for 2022, 3.4 million. In 2022, there were 18 cases over $1 million at a cost of 28 million. And some of those cases, unfortunately, have resulted in estate lates, and some of them carry on from year to year. So there's a lot of pressure on in terms of case management to see where we can try and save costs in terms of those very large cases that go on and on. Next slide. And that's the underwriting, looking at the net position. And this is the amount that gets transferred, was transferred to the old accumulated funds, and now gets transferred to liability for future members. And if you look at the detailed breakdown at the back of the detailed financials, you'll see these figures. So for 2022, we were down by 28.8 million, 2023, 22.1 million. Positive as far as 2023 was concerned, the changes that we made to the investment strategy did double our investment income. So that was a very positive move, and we're continuing to see the advantage of that in 2024. Next slide. Looking at the reserve ratio restated for 2022 in terms of the IFRS 17, sitting at just below 80%. And for 2023, 65%. These were projections we expected based on our pricing, and we expect to end up at about 60% at the end of 2024. Remembering that the level that the registrar requires us to have is 25%, so we are one of the schemes that are way above that percentage. There are many schemes out there that are battling to get to that percentage. Next slide, please. Principal members, we have had a slow decline in the principal members, 3708 at the end of 2022, 3465 for 2023, and I will talk to what we're trying to do to try and stem that outflow as such. Next slide, please. Okay, before we start talking about trustee fee increase, I think just understanding that we realize this is a difficult environment, but we are a small scheme, so we're adaptable. We can put changes in place, and we don't have to have major changes to get a turnaround in terms of that membership. So we are definitely heading, as I said, for probably single parents, because we're getting to the point we see it more and more where two adults are not coming onto the scheme. We're very favorable in terms of children. So you will see that in terms of our social media and the way we're approaching things to appeal to that younger membership. And the suggestions that we've put forward in terms of product changes, we'll talk to that as well, which I'll talk to when we get to the increase stage. Looking at our trustee fee increase now, our trustee fees, just to put it into perspective, there are some trustees out there that are earning what our entire board earns for the year. So just to put that into perspective, the current meeting fee is 6,000 per trustee. That includes preparation time. We are proposing a 5% increase to put it up to 6,300. Our total trustee fees for the year for 2022 was 242,000, and for 2023 it was 299,000. So this is also one of the issues that are on your voting form that we'd like you to vote for when you get to your voting, or perhaps you voted already. Next slide, please. Trustee elections, very important. Very, very important. Our trustees have a huge responsibility to you as members. And you know that we put rules in place a while ago, required by registrar as well, where we have trustees are on the board for 2-3-year terms. They then have to step off the board for a year, and they are allowed to come back. So in terms of that, we have Mr. Jürgen Muller, who is retiring after his first 3-year stint, and he is available for re-election. Then for positions that are available, we've got Mrs. Karen Schlemmer. She has had her term on the board for her 6 years. She's had a year break, and she's kindly offered herself to be back on the board. And then a new member, Mr. Willem Bass. All of them are members of the scheme. And looking at, I'm not going to go into their CVs, you do have their detailed CVs, but they bring a very strong skill set. If you look at the three of them, they really cover all the areas, being finance, HR, IT, general knowledge of schemes. So a very strong bunch of nominees, if I can put it like that. And I encourage you to vote for them. Just why there are 2 positions available besides the retiring trustee, we have our current chairman, and we have Nick Cornier, who was our chairman for many years, and vice chairman, having to step down because they have now had their 2 6-year stints. Those of you who are 2 3-year stints, making it up to 6 years rather. Those of you who know Nick Cornier know he's been with the scheme for a long time as well. We only brought in this rule a few years ago, so that's why it's now the 6 years for both of them. So those are elections, and we require you to vote on that as well. Next slide, please. General rule changes. These general rule changes are not that important, if I can put it like that, the way the scheme is governed at the moment, because we are very careful in terms of who we accept nominations from. We do our own informal vetting, if I can put it that way. We did have an inspection from the Council for Medical Schemes at the beginning of the year. They do this as a standard sort of thing every so often. And they did suggest a few changes, which we had a look at and thought, okay, it seems quite reasonable to put this into the rules so that it does protect members from future boards. So the first thing, and this is being required for all schemes, is that officers of the scheme are properly vetted through an external party. So officers of the scheme talking to the principal officer and trustees, they will be vetted, and there's no problem in that. Obviously, criminal checks and particularly education checks and all that kind of thing are important. Other boards have had problems with that. We are putting into the rules that trustees may be reimbursed for reasonable expenses. This does happen, but it's minimal as far as the scheme is concerned. But we do want to put it into the rules to ensure that people know it's only reasonable expenses and it's got to be approved. And then a rule to state that the trustees and the audit committee members may receive remuneration for attending meetings. So it's just a rule that's there. The AGM does approve the meeting fee, and these changes in the rules really just ensure strict governance for future boards. So it's things that are happening in the scheme. It's not that they're not, but it's just to have it there as a rule so people know that that's got to be followed. You are asked to vote on that, remembering that you as the members do have a say in any general rule changes we put forward. Always remembering that other schemes do not do this. We do not change general rules without requesting members to vote on it to see if they're happy or not. Next slide, please. Right, talking about the product going forward, and I have been talking about bringing on a profile of member that will ensure cross-subsidy within the scheme. Now, looking at our three products, we've got the My Health 200, which is 200% on specialist fees, mainly a more hospital-orientated plan. Then you have the My Health 200 Plus, which is the My Health 200, but it has a day-to-day on it. It also has a savings portion on it. And you do have the benefit there of the standard tier on oncology treatment if you're curable. Okay, so if it hasn't metastasized, you are entitled to that. Then the product that most of our members sit on, the My Health 100 Saver. Now, this is the product that new members are coming onto the scheme. It's the one that companies push for their employees if they have an employee, if we have employee groups who are looking at the scheme. We have decided to have a look at these products and say, right, we need to make the My Health 100 Saver more attractive for the younger family. And what benefits can we add to that that will attract a younger family? Quite honestly, and we'll send out notification when we send out the details on the products. If you are requiring different things in terms of your health, then you should probably be on the My Health 200. And I think we've had incidents, we've had a lot of people who sit on the My Health 100 Saver that should probably sit on the My Health 200. So we are trying to make this product attractive to people to bring in cross-subsidy. We have to do it slowly, and we also have to look at benefits that attract that group, and it's very important. So what we have decided to add is 2 additional GP visits only for minors. So not for adults, for minors. An optometry visit for a minor, and there will be limits on these things. I think today with social media and just the way youngsters are using phones and computers, eyesight is not what it should be. So it's very important for minors to have their eyes tested at school. Many years ago, you only had very few people at schools who had glasses. Now most of the children have got glasses. Childhood vaccinations are also included. One gynecologist consultation, because remember we're trying to track the young mother. We are putting a limit on out-of-hospital pathology. The reason being, we've seen that in terms of that pathology is linked into chronic conditions. And if people need large amounts of out-of-hospital pathology, then they should rather be on the My Health 200. And some of it is being used inappropriately, so we're looking at that very carefully. There is a small increase in savings, and then the important one, hip and knee replacements, limited to PMB. So what that means is it will be covered on that product if there is an accident or a fall. What we are trying to do there is really for the older generation who probably need the hip and knee replacements, actually to move on to the My Health 200 because that's not changing. So you will get that benefit there. So it's to split the membership so that we can have a product where we can offer more benefits to younger people going forward. Next slide, please. Right, so with those changes and taking into account the expected price increase from the suppliers, on drugs, on all the things related to medical, and very importantly, looking at the profile of the members, these are the increases that we have put forward going into 2025, 380 Rand on the My Health 200. And as I've said, existing members need to choose very carefully between those who are on the My Health 100 saver, whether they should be there, what benefits they need, and moving to My Health 200. On the My Health 100, taking into account the extra benefits, we've increased the savings slightly, and we are working on a 10.73 increase. And then My Health 200 Plus, an old profile on this product, obviously the top product. If we look at it in terms of top products out there, it sounds a horrific amount of money, but there are people who are prepared to pay that, a 10.7% increase. What is important when we look at the pricing, and this is what we used last year as well, we do not want to underprice and find ourselves in a position where financially we're in trouble, which some schemes have done. We would rather give the increase year by year than suddenly turn around and say to you, we need a 20% increase. So the financial stability to get through the rough roads ahead, if I can put it like that, is extremely important as far as the scheme is concerned. When you are voting on those various issues, there's a lot to vote on. Please remember, you must vote on each issue. So you can either decide to say yes or no, or you're withholding your vote. Please put a tick on withhold if you don't know what you want to do. Otherwise, it doesn't close off your vote. So please make very sure when you're voting that you vote on each issue. And if you want to withhold your vote, state that there. What I'll do now is take questions. I have got the questions in front of me. I do have a question here. So now's your chance to ask questions. One of the questions that have come up, Cape Medical Plan was mentioned in a communication from the CMS as having had high AGM costs for last year's AGM. Was the matter resolved? Because we usually have low AGM costs. This was something that came up. We were quite shocked by it because our AGM costs, as you can see in our financials, is 60,000 and it's been like that for a couple of years. The cost of that is the grouping that we use to help us set up this virtual AGM. They control proxies, they control the voting, they give us reports. It also makes it very transparent for you as the member. And I think the very important thing as far as the scheme is concerned is that we have a lot more participation in a virtual AGM. Our costs were not high. I then approached CMS on this. There was actually a meeting, and the person who did the article at CMS, I approached and I said, what is this about? Because there was us mentioned and one or two others. What they did was they took the AGM cost and divided it by the number of members. So it looked as if per member, our AGM cost was high, which it wasn't. And I explained to them, I said, there is a standard cost you have for an AGM, whether you 20,000 members or 3,000 members or 60,000 members. So you can't look at it like that. They've agreed that that was the incorrect way to do it. I also said to them to go to something like MoneyWeb and put something out there that makes our members feel very insecure as to what's going on. So yes, hopefully the matter is resolved, and they quite agreed that our cost was not excessive. And when we had our inspection, it was brought up as well, and they also agreed the cost was not excessive. But obviously the damage gets done when something like that gets into the hands of those at MoneyWeb. Hopefully that's answered the question. Please post questions if you have any more. But I have one here. I've read the summarized series of the trustees to be voted in. I do not see mention of how they intend of turning the loss around. As I understand it, trustees have fiduciary responsibility to the trust, and why the need for the fee increase when the financials are on such a deficit. Asset manager fees are quite high. How they manage the assets favorably or not has a direct impact on the result of the scheme. They also have a reasonability to act in the benefit of the trust. Auditors audit the record of historical transactions. Please explain why the change in auditors and not asset managers. So quite a lot of questions there. And first of all, as far as the trustees are concerned, 2 of the nominees have actually been involved with the scheme before. The other nominee comes in as somebody new, and they understand their fiduciary duties. There is a training process for trustees, and part of being at the board meetings and attending strategic meetings is discussions on how the scheme can be turned around. I don't think you can vote a trustee in based on his ability to change the scheme, because I don't think they know enough at this stage. They have to understand this very complex industry before they can even start suggesting how to turn the loss around. In terms of the increase, I think the increase is minimal. And in fairness, the trustees do put in a lot of work and take on a lot of responsibility, and it's actually a very minimal fee. For some of the members of other committees, they actually have to take time of work, so the fee covers the time that they have of work. So we did have a period where for quite a number of years we didn't give an increase, and then there's a huge catch up to be made. So I don't think I don't think the fee's unreasonable, and obviously you people have the chance to vote on that. Talking about asset managers, we did have a look at auditors. We previously have looked at the asset managers. If you have a look at our investments are not massive, so we are limited as to who we can use in terms of asset managers. For some of the very big guys, we're too small. I think what people must also understand is that there's a regulation stating how the money can be invested. So the asset managers are also bound by the regulations in the Act. So they are limited, for example, investing in offshore investments. They're limited in doing that. So there is and they're not allowed to invest money in any equities where it involves other, for example, we can't invest in Discovery Health because they have an administrator in the medical schemes area. If you look at the JSE at the moment, I was reading an article the other day, it's almost halved over the last couple of years. So there's a very limited space. And we have given them a strict mandate as to how we want them to operate, and we've seen definite improvement in terms of the current asset manager. So we do look at that. Hopefully that answered that quite complicated question. I'm just waiting. It's not deathly silence. I'm just waiting to see if anybody else is going to be posting questions in the question box. I'm not seeing further questions. I'd just like to wait a minute or two before we close the ability of members to question. I think it is important for members to partake. I see there's a question come through on comment on cash flow. We manage our cash flow very, very carefully. It's quite a general question that's being asked. We don't have a problem with cash flow. I think if that's what somebody's worried about, on our ability to pay claims, and we monitor it very, very carefully. I'm not sure if that answers that question, quite honestly. Another question come through. Pathology costs will remain covered for the 200 plan. Correct. If you are on the My Health 200 or My Health 200 Plus, your out-of-hospital pathology will be covered. It will still be covered on the 100 saver. However, there will be a limit on out-of-hospital pathology. But if you are on chronic medication, there is cover for chronic pathology related to your chronic condition as part of the formulary. Another question, if the auditors now have their own actuaries, will this mean that CMP will not have the costs associated with getting their own actuaries? I really wish that was true. Our actuaries do a lot of work for us on a monthly basis. We have them on a retainer. They also help us with the pricing. In terms of the actuaries that the auditors have, we have little to no contact with them. They do their own actuarial calculation and compare their figures with our actuaries, and all we ever get from them is to say whether they think our actuaries' figure is right or not. We had a slight difference on the actuarial figure on the liability for incurred claims in the financials, and all they're telling us is they get a different figure. We've asked them, what assumptions, it's not a massive difference, what assumptions are you using? And why do you have a different figure to our actuaries? We have no answer. So those actuaries are working for the auditors so that the audit partner can rely on our figures, if that answers your question. So no, unfortunately, we don't have any reduced costs as far as actuaries are concerned. Another question come up, what is the current age profile? In terms of the current age profile, we've got our pensioner ratio is getting slightly higher year by year. In terms of our age profile of our main member, our average age there is sitting at 34. It varies on the different products. If you look at it on the My Health 200 Plus, you're looking at over 75. We do have quite a strong base of children because of the low rate that we give the child beneficiary, which is obviously beneficial in terms of pricing. But our age profile is no worse than anybody. There are some of the very big schemes where the age profile is a little bit better, but our age profile is probably, if I look at other schemes, we sit in the middle, if I can put it like that. A compliment from someone, thank you very much. Thank you for the work you're doing. It is a hostile environment and the team remain very helpful. And I thank you for that, because I think the team does take a lot of pressure. There's changes we put forward. And I always say to members, remember, this is your scheme. We are not separate from the scheme. We're actually working for you. The scheme is the members. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on, and where we do stand out compared to the other schemes out there, is that we have that unique ability to talk to the members, that they can actually talk to a person. They're not a number in some customer care queue. And we try and use that as our unique selling point. And particularly when people are sick, our case managers are wonderfully helpful there. Another question, you want to attract the young mother. How are you going to make them aware of CMP? Yeah, good question. We want the young people out there. I think we're doing it in various ways. One is looking at the benefit set. Secondly is using that. I've given those details through to social media. So they use that in our social media posts and our Google ads, and then also through the broker profile. And I don't want to go into the detail of Google ads, but Google has a way of people searching and identifying. I mean, I can tell you in terms of our social media, what ages of people going on, and it's people between mainly females, and I can tell you the age, and I can even tell you what time they go on. So we direct the advertising towards that profile. And then obviously using a broker profile to also get into that market space. Those are all the questions I have at the moment. Are there any other questions coming through? I don't see anything. Okay, I'll keep the question box open, but at this stage, a few thank yous are due. And while I'm doing that, if anybody wants to post a question, you can, and I will answer it before we close for the voting. We have some changes happening this year in terms of our Audit and Risk Committee. Our Audit and Risk Committee form a very important part of the scheme, particularly in terms of IFRS changes and looking at risk and assisting the trustees through a very difficult time with changes in terms of how we report financials. Chanel Sickle has been our audit chair since 2018. She has served the committee in an amazing capacity, always being available and ready to assist with audit queries and anything else we require her to do. She is stepping down as the audit chair. She will, however, stay on the audit committee for a time just to assist with getting a new chair settled down. So Chanel, thank you. We really appreciate all the time you have spent, and I think particularly from the financial team of the scheme and the backing that you have given us during quite a trying period this year with all the changes. Then we have Mike Moray. He sat on the ARC committee and he has stepped down. Mike has had a very long period with the scheme. He was a board member for many, many years. His association with the scheme steps right back to early 1998, 1999, round about there. He left and then he came back as a trustee. He was a trustee from 2003 to 2009, and then he stepped onto the audit committee. Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with you over all these years. We hope we haven't seen the last of you. Maybe you'll consider a board position again one day, but your input has been really appreciated. And I think the depth of knowledge of knowing the scheme you've brought to the audit committee has really made that audit committee function even better. So we thank you for that. And then we have Rob, our chairperson, who has been with the scheme for many years, since 2017. He stepped into the gap as chairperson very willingly when Nick decided to step down. He has always been available to sit on any committee, whether it be finance committee or whatever we need him to do. He's always been happy to do that, along with managing a very challenging work career. So Rob, we thank you for that. We appreciate the time you have made for Cape Medical Plan and the support that you have given us as a team. I think as a management team, it's always important to know that your trustees are behind you and supporting you in what you do. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And then Nick Cornier, those of you who know Nick has been with the scheme for over 30 years. Nick has come onto the scheme through one of our groups. The group then left. He came on as in his private capacity. He has served as chairman, he has served as vice chairman, he has been very strong on the finance committee. I think as a team, from the management team and the board point of view, over those many years, we've been through many ups and downs in terms of challenges, and Nick has always been there supporting our decisions, and also as a voice of reason, saying, okay, hold on guys, think of it like that. Very logical, and a very, very strong support. Nick, we wouldn't be where we are today without you. We're going to miss having that person coming down from Gauteng. Well, he's been doing it virtually for a while, but your input into this organization has been invaluable, and we thank you for that. I just want to check on questions. I don't have any further questions coming through. So I'm assuming question time is over. I hope I managed to give you a feel for what is going on. I hope I managed to give you enough information so that you can vote. Remember, when you are voting, the voting is open. As I've said earlier, please vote on everything. And please remember to vote yes, no, or vote withheld. I now hand over to the chairman.
Thanks, Charlene. Appreciate that. Yeah, and just in closing, I'd also just to echo what Charlene said in all those thank yous. And also just from my point of view, I mean, it's been great working with the scheme and my fellow board members. So thank you to all of you. And I'd just like to extend a thank you to you, Charlene, and the team at Cape Medical Plan, because you do an outstanding job, and you're the heartbeat, you and the staff of the scheme. So yeah, I'm going to be handing over the reins to the next, and yeah, good luck. So,
Thanks, Rob.
We're going to hang around for a bit, or we're going to close the meeting, and then we'll keep the voting open for a little while.
Close meeting. I've no questions coming through.
Yeah, perfect. So we'll close the meeting, and then the voting will end shortly. Thank you all.